So for those that joined us, I would like to welcome you to the Sustainability and Competitive Systems webinar this afternoon, and I'd now like to introduce you to Peter Nemcis to start the session. Peter, over to you. You can unmute yourself and pop your webcam on. Thank you. Sorry, Peter, you just need to unmute yourself.
Good. Thank you, everybody, for joining the webinar today. We've got quite a lot to get through and some interesting discussions to get through and talk about. In particular was the government imperatives that they've outlined just recently, which is having an impact on the manufacturing area itself, but also on training and employment through the various areas there. So using those imperatives that the government has outlined, we've then decided to engage with industry to find out a little bit more about their thoughts so that we can prepare ourselves for the future. I think the main things we're looking at is the future. What does the future look like? What do we need to do to get there? And how do we support industry and get that feedback? And that's the important part of today. Today I'm joined by some other members of the Sustainability Industry Reference Committee, which is our newest member of the committee is Bo Christensen. Bo, welcome to the webinar and also welcome to the Industry Reference Committee. We've also got Bradley Anderson and Andrew Peterson, and we've also got Mike Grogan there as well, from who's National Director of the Advanced Manufacturing Centre. And Mike will be hosting or facilitating breakout sessions and also the panel session where we talk about the various questions through there. So Mike is also Deputy Chair, Director of the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, and the AMGC is industry-led and is federally funded, the goal of unlocking new commercial opportunities and driving innovation in Australian manufacturing. So Michael brings extensive knowledge to both the AMGC and certainly to our IRC with his background on manufacturing and competitive systems as well. Bradley Anderson is part of the New South Wales Government and implementing energy efficient programs across New South Wales businesses. Bo is our newly introduced member of the committee, is involved with one of the companies that's involved in development of the rail crossing projects within Melbourne. And Andrew Peterson is Chief Executive Officer of Business Council for Sustainability Development Australia and national peak body representing forward-thinking companies and organisational sections of the industry to move towards a sustainable Australia. So with that, then I would like to hand over to Michael Grogan, who will then manage the panel session and also the start of the breakout groups.
And I almost did it without having to click to take myself off mute. Thanks very much, Peter. And welcome to everyone for participating. We've got a great attendance today. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting today. We're all on different lands across Australia, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also kia ora koutou to our friends from across the water. Also like to take the opportunity to actually thank IPSA for being proactive and putting these things together. Events such as this provide an excellent opportunity to further discuss, as Peter said, those 6 priority areas and provide the government with some on-the-ground feedback from industry. Effective collaboration between employers, employees, and also the industry associations and the training sector with government is vital to our recovery and growth, especially as it pertains to the modern manufacturing industry. We all know that having an effective supply chain is key to the future of manufacturing, and that manufacturing can't grow without a skilled workforce. If recent times have shown us anything, is that the speed with which we need to provide these skills and to ensure flexibility and resilience in our workforce is paramount. Just as an example, I had an opportunity to talk to a TAFE, it was 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about what they've had to do over the last 9 months. And the comment was that if they had been asked to implement an exercise such as that, it would have taken them literally 3 to 5 years to do it, what they've effectively done over the last 9 months. I'm certainly not advocating we need to have a crisis on an ongoing basis, but we've demonstrated, and industry has demonstrated, that that degree of flexibility and that kind of approach is there, and we have proven it. As Peter said, we're looking at those 6 industry areas, particularly now, and it is a government focus, and AMG has also been redirected back, especially into those areas from a funding perspective. And just as a reminder, we're talking about resources, technology and critical minerals, food and beverage, medtech products, recycling and clean energy, defence and space. So they're the areas we're talking about particularly. Today, we're specifically looking at sustainability as part of this program and ongoing webinars that IPSA has put together. And the 3 elements of it, as we've put forward as far as the IRC is concerned, is those competitive systems and practices, energy efficiency and recycling. As is normal, these sort of programs, we're going to call a Q&A panel, actually start to drill into it, and you're not listening to one person just give a bit of a sermon on things, but we've got a bit of an interactive Q&A type session. We've got 3 panel members, Anderson, Andy Kelso and Richard Collins. And Richard comes from a long, well, he has got a long history as far as waste industry strategy is concerned, and he is very influential in that area where he's worked for over the last 19 years. And he's also the managing editor from Inside Waste Management, and has been a huge advocate for waste industry over the years. Bradley, as Peter said, is from the Program Manager for Energy Management Systems in the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, and has over 10 years experience in senior roles in energy and sustainability sector. And Andy Kelso as well. Andy owns the company Complete Lean Solutions, and they've been in existence for over 15 years and have actually expanded back into the UK, a bit of Coles to Newcastle type thing. Andy he is from Toyota, so has a long history in the implementation and development of lean solutions in industry. And actually I've used them in a past life, and they do provide a very hands-on approach and a very practical approach to lean in the workplace. So with that, I'd like Andy, Bradley and Richard to unmute their microphones and open up the discussion for a general panel perspective. We're actually right on time, so that's really good, and we're looking to run this through to about 2:55, so you can input the questions. But what I'd like to do is start off with a bit of an overview of industry itself before we dive too deeply into some of the sustainability questions that I know you're all very keen to ask. But what I'd like to do is just, as I said, start off with that question, and I'd direct it to Richard to start with, is what do you see as the future of advanced manufacturing over the next 2 to 5 years?
Great question, and nice to be with you all. It's refreshing to be talking to a manufacturing group rather than the bottom half of the circle, the circular economy that I often talk about. And I think that probably gives you my key answer is a much more circular approach to materials and resources. So at the moment, we're still fairly linear. Manufacturing and other sectors, retail, supply chain, hospitality, generates the waste. Households, obviously. and then my sector takes it and tries to find a home for it, whether that's disposal or some sort of productive use. And we're right in the throes now of a really profound change in the way that works. There's been talk about it for the 20 years I've been covering the sector. I think of kind of circular economy, industrial ecology. There's been a lot of terms for it, cradle to cradle. We are at a change, I think, that's going to actually have traction now with the likes of China no longer, for 20 years, again, has been very happily absorbing our resources, no longer happy to do so. We need to find new solutions to our resources, and when you start then not just focusing on that bottom end of the chain, but what does that mean in terms of a circular economy within Australia? Talking to manufacturing sector is absolutely critical. So it's everybody, and I think collaboration across that resources management chain is where I see the great changes are going to be coming in the next decade or so. Lots more detail I can go into there, but that's my position statement.
That's great. Thanks. Bradley, what's your take on it, of where manufacturing is in the next, advanced manufacturing is in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, Michael, again, an interesting question. I'll echo the last response. I'm going to talk about manufacturing in general, as the modern manufacturing strategy does look at more than the advanced manufacturing sector. I've got quite a lot of history with food and beverage manufacturing. And what I'm saying is, most of manufacturing in Australia, the energy, and I think energy has changed the conversation around energy, the understanding of energy, the importance of energy as an input into manufacturing. The entire manufacturing industry has changed dramatically over the last couple of years, and moving forward over the next 2 to 5, it's going to continue to become a really, really important area. I can quote Innes Willocks, the CEO of the Australian Industry Group, by saying energy used to be a niche issue for business, and it is now a boardroom issue. And I think that really, really does sum up what's about to happen. Most of the energy consumed within the manufacturing sector is for the production of heat. So thermal processes. There's a vast majority of energy that manufacturing businesses across the country, and particularly in New South Wales, use energy for is to heat things up. The electrification of processes is something that we're going to start to see a massive uptake and advancements in over the next 2 to 5 years. The skills that are required for the industry to not only undertake these types of projects, but to understand their thermal loads, to be able to balance that thermal load across sites, to be able to analyse, to capture and analyse the data that's required for this understanding. It's we're in for a pretty dramatic shift from the old way of doing things, and it's exciting, but it also poses a big challenge for our manufacturing sector to make sure they've got the skills that's needed, and to be able to make this transition early and stay competitive.
Thanks, Brady. And I just on that, you're saying about where advanced or not advanced. From an advanced manufacturing growth centre perspective, we're at pains not to actually identify who is advanced and who's not, because we more so say it's not what you make, it's how you make it, and that's what you were saying about
exactly. Yeah.
And energy consumption. It's how you make that defines you as a modern or an advanced manufacturer.
Spot on, Michael. Yeah.
Andy, what's your take on that?
Basically, echoing off to changes so rapid. So energy prices are going up.
Just having a bit of audio with that, Andy. Is anyone else having that? With the microphone?
Yeah.
You want to have another crack at it, Andy, or you?
Wow.
Can you hear me?
I'll ask. That's better.
Yep, that's better.
Yep. Okay, good. So many things are changing at the moment. You mentioned already recycling, the cost of manufacturing to make sure we look after our environment, the cost of energy going through the roof. The last 6 months have shown us that reliance on internal manufacturing, Australian manufacturing, would have been a good thing. Lead times have gone through the roof for anything being imported. Disagreements with China, tariffs, bad press, if you want, between the two countries. Everything is up in the air. Everything is up in the air. And to me, businesses are being forced to change. As Michael mentioned at the start, even tastes are being forced to change. Can you believe that? It's just such a cauldron of change that businesses need to be on their toes. They need to be on their toes. They need to be able to react quickly. They need to pivot quickly. They need to change their processes quickly. They need to respond to government rules. They need to change to markets. They need to produce new things. They need to be just agile and quick thinking. And for that to happen, it's not just the guys in the top and in the boardroom. It's everybody in the company needs to have a thinking way around changing the business, seeing change not as part of the job, but the job, to the point where when staff are being employed in businesses, we're not looking for a new production team leader or a new warehouse manager or a new finance director. We're looking for somebody who's going to help change this business rapidly. And while they're doing that, they can be a finance manager or a production supervisor. And that's a different type of person. We need people in manufacturing that are recognizing that part of their responsibility, a large part of their responsibility going forward, is going to be able to change processes, make them better, save costs, shorter lead time, make them more effective with less waste, because that's what the market's going to demand. And that ties very neatly into lean thinking and agile thinking.
Thanks for that, Andy. I'm sort of going to go off a little bit off script, because just taking that lead there, and again, I'll open this up to all of you to have some input into, but historically, and I've got the grey hair to prove it, sustainability and lean was a nice to have. Certainly in discussions with young people today, they are demanding it in the workplace. And as you said, Andy, and I think that's what I want to catch on to, is that holistic view of it's a top to bottom type of approach to it. Where do we see that moving forward? Richard, do you want to kick that off again? So whether it is a nice to have or now a must have.
So you just need to unmute yourself, Richard. Apologies, Richard.
He's so keen to answer.
That's it. Yeah, it's going to be the term of 2020, isn't it? You're on mute. I like the observation, Michael. I've been doing this for 20 odd years, and when I was running the magazines, our readership group used to be environment managers, who are often at the time the safety manager, the OH&S manager, and it was because they were the systems thinkers in businesses at the time. There was no one else who had a cross-cutting kind of function. And that has changed rapidly over the last 20 years to increasing specialisation. I think we are going to see absolutely more of that specialisation. And Andy's point, I think, around the sorts of skills that we need to have in workplaces, our understanding of materials, again, looping back to my area of expertise, and manufacturing processes and then product design. And we don't talk about that a lot in Australia. We tend to be that kind of downstream from Europe and Asia and in American manufacturing. So again, nice to be in a room of manufacturers here. But that design piece, I think, is going to be critical as well. So I think it is going to be a must-have. It's already moving out of the fringe into much more the mainstream, and you see that in investment processes as well. So there's the public, the political, and the investment world are all moving into a place where sustainability is much more central to their life.
It certainly is. Bradley?
Yeah, look, I'm going to echo a bit of what's being said, but put the energy spin on it. Look, you're right. I think it's, you know, the quote that I said from Ines Willett, CEO of the Australian Industry Group, really does sum this point up, Michael. I think that what's also happened in the business world, it's an interesting one, because the finance sector, you know, a lot of the decisions that get made in those boardrooms, a lot of the decisions that businesses follow, comes from where the money is. You know, follow the money is the old phrase. And the finance sector has started investing heavily into sustainability, into you know, those types of investments that are going to have long-term benefits, whether that's, you know, renewable energy, and we're seeing that in New South Wales with the renewable energy zones that have been announced. We've now got an electricity infrastructure roadmap, which has just passed through Parliament in New South Wales as well. All of these things, and the net zero plan, we've set ambitious targets for emissions reductions across the state. These things are driven by where the money goes, and it's definitely not a nice to have anymore. This is where business is moving. This is where the money's already moving, and it's important that you know, that the whole system keeps up with that momentum.
And what's your take on it, Andy?
Well, again, 30 years ago, safety was a nice to have in businesses. Yeah, nice to have. Yeah. Quality, about 15 years ago, quality. If you had a good quality system, you could sort of compete pretty well with the businesses and others around you, and you'd be okay. Again, both safety and quality are now just essential, but you can't operate. If you have a product that's not good quality, or if you have an environment that's not safe, you're out of business in weeks, months, certainly not years. A culture of safety is essential. You can't be in business if you haven't got it. A culture of quality is essential in business. You won't exist if you don't have that. A culture of sustainability in terms of your energy usage and that, it's been driven by the money, certainly, but it's got to be essential as you go forward. And the next thing on that list, it makes perfect sense if you join the dots, and 3 dots mean it's a trend. If you don't have a culture of continuous improvement in your business, you aren't going to be able to cope with the cost reduction targets that you're going to be set to satisfy all the additional costs your businesses are going to have to incur due to energy prices, due to sustainability rules, due to the buying things on shore rather than offshore, due to lead times, etc. If you don't have a cost reduction mindset within your culture of your business, somebody else will have alongside safety and quality, and they'll beat you. They'll beat you to the customer every time. It's essential.
Yeah, absolutely. And just encourage everyone, if you have got some specific questions, please don't hesitate to drop them into the chat and feed them through. I'll stay with you, Andy, then. Why is it then we have this perception, whether it be at board level or at shop floor level, that there's a cost involved with this? How do we move the conversation to actually, as you've already pointed out, that, you know, we can, you know, if you're not doing it, you're not going to be globally competitive, but also reaping a lot of the benefits in waste or eliminating waste out of the processes?
I think it comes down to a logical thinking about each business's value. Every business has safety as a value in their organization, and they believe it. They measure it, and they graph it, and they chart it, and if they have problems around it, they investigate them. They also spend money on safety. They spend money on painting the floor. They spend money on putting signs up that say wear your ear defenders. They spend money on buying hard hats and high-vis vests. They spend money on training people how to lift things and putting cranes in place so they don't damage their backs. They spend a lot of money on safety because they recognize that it's an essential part of their business. And if they don't do it, then they won't exist. They spend a lot of money on quality systems and inspection and checking and automatic metal detectors and you name it. They spend a lot of money on making sure that quality is maintained. They spend a lot of money on delivering in full on time. DIFOT is very important. And once again, they measure it, they put in place cost to make it happen. So if you ask anybody if they want safety, they say yes. Do you spend money on it? Yes. Do you want quality? Yes, we do. Do you want to spend money on quality? Yes, we do. Yes, we spend money on those things, but we know that the money we're spending on those things is far less than the gain that we're going to get by spending that money, and therefore we do it. Do you want continuous improvement in your business? Yes, of course we do. All right, do you spend any money on it? Not really. Do you measure it? No. Do you measure it like you measure safety? No. Well, so you don't measure it, you don't spend any money on it, but you just expect it to happen magically because the pixies are going to come in on night shift and do it all for you. You've just got to get that mindset to people. If they want something, automatically, the reason why they want it is that they believe the long-term value in it is there, so they're prepared to spend some money up front to deliver it properly in the business, just like they did with safety, just like they did with quality. Exactly the same.
The benefits moving forward. Bradley, how do you see it from an energy perspective? Because again, parts of the conversation are always saying it's a cost rather than a long-term benefit.
Yeah, look, this has been an ongoing thing, and this is again one of those shifts that you're talking about in the appreciation and the understanding of the importance of energy and sustainability for a business. So there's two things that I'll say just in response to this one. For a lot of businesses that are downstream in supply chains, some of the larger businesses are setting quite public, quite aggressive and detailed decarbonisation pathways for themselves. So they've set targets of achieving, net zero operations by 2030, by 2035, by 2050. Meat and livestock in Australia, the entire industry has said that they will decarbonise their industry by 2030. Now, if you're downstream in that supply chain, you're going to start to be requested just to win tenders, just to ensure that you're still getting the revenue that you're currently getting. You're going to start to be requested to have a lot of information about your energy performance. What are you doing? What's your strategies to reduce that energy use, et cetera, et cetera. So going back to what was just said by Andy, if you're not measuring these things and you can't explain what your current performance is and what your plans are to improve that, then you're going to start to miss out on a lot of opportunities. So that's one side of the coin, that it's starting to be that cost of doing something about energy use or reducing your energy is starting to be understood as a very important part of it. The other thing is that the cost of energy in Australia has gone up. Everyone knows it's gone up quite dramatically from the historic cheap prices that we had for electricity and gas in Australia. This has meant that the cost of reducing that energy use is now seen as quite it's quite an investment for a company's future. So your return on investment, you usually look, most energy efficiency projects that are sort of the more simple ones, you're looking at between a 1 year and 5 year return on investment. So then after that 5 years or after that 1 year, essentially it's cost positive, right? Like, so you've invested, you've spent the money, you've reduced your energy use, and over the long term of your facility's operations, it's actually making money rather than it being a cost. That's the other thing that I just wanted to point out. There's some really good examples we've got in New South Wales of simple things like compressed air system overhauls and optimisation, which have reduced, there's just a little automotive, not too little, but there's an automotive parts manufacturer, Trident, in New South Wales, that has saved around 60% of their energy bill from just the one compressed air optimisation project. And they actually got a call from their energy company saying, I think there's something wrong with your facility. We've just seen your energy use drop by 60%. And the general manager, or the operations manager, sorry, pretty much laughed at the energy company on the other end of the phone because he knew exactly why it had dropped by 60%. So yeah, I just thought I'd highlight some of the benefits rather than the costs of reducing energy consumption.
Yeah, certainly we do tend to focus on the cost rather than some of those upsides as well. Yeah. What about from a waste perspective, Richard?
On mute. Yeah, good conversation. So probably 2 points to throw in the mix. You know, Brad mentioned energy price trajectory in the last decade or so. You know, waste industry works pretty hard to keep prices down, competitive industry, and yet I think we are going to see increase in prices over time as things like cheap China export disappear, and we do need to do more of that, you know, finding solutions on our own domestically. So you know, councils are facing significant increases in their recycling costs, having to break contracts and renegotiate contracts. Now, won't say that the waste disposal will necessarily follow that same track, but in some jurisdictions, including Sydney, where I am, you know, we've got 15 years worth of landfill capacity within Sydney, and after that, we are either sending it to an energy from waste facility or exporting it to, you know, landfills developed outside Sydney, and that will layer in additional cost. So don't expect your waste and recycling baseline costs to stay as flat as they are. Having said that, they are pretty negligible in the manufacturing context. The second piece is that, you know, the waste disposal piece costs are, I think, also reflective of some inefficiencies up the chain. And, you know, what you might be throwing away is not just, you know, $100 worth of, you know, waste disposal fee, but some significant, you know, material that has been, you know, you procured and had to spend processing time and energy and labour costs on, that is not then productive. So it's a loss of productivity. And I think that's a more interesting way to frame that waste and recycling discussion rather than just how do we get rid of it at the end of the pipe.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we're missing it. So before I come back to that question we have, which I was meant to use or start with, where the opportunities does the modern manufacturing strategy present for industry and business, I'd just like to just tease this out a little bit more, but specifically as far as training and education goes, that we've talked about the benefits and what we need to do and some of the demands from younger people and what the community as a whole is demanding. Where do you see, are these skills that we're talking about from a training perspective, do they sit outside training packages, or should they actually be embedded in a training package? Is this the fundamental part of it? As from a manufacturer, we learn to weld, we also learn about lean, and we learn about these things alongside. They're not, traditionally today, we separate them out, and we train and teach them separately inside, whether it be inside business, etc. But, you know, there's those two arguments. Should they be embedded? What's the opinion of the panel on that? Just touching that we're going to sort of wrap this up 10 to 15, but I would like to come back to that opportunities question. So do you want to, while you're there, Richard, comment on that, and then we'll go back?
Yeah, I think, if I have a crack at this one, I won't say this is a highly developed view. So to be circular more, we need innovation and collaboration. We need systems thinking, holistic thinking. And it is a kind of a different mindset from just what's the least cost way to manage this issue. It's looking upstream at the resource inputs. It's looking at the value of the product and now thinking about the redesign of the product. And it's engaging then with your service providers to get better data, to be able to analyse that data, and to then operationalise that within your process, within the business itself. So I think there's going to be a shift in those sorts of systems thinking skills to be able to look up and down and across sectors. There's a reason the kind of environment managers have to, you know, are kind of generalists, and that is that they tend to have to understand all aspects of the business, and I think that's something that, you know, kind of we will see more of. Whether we need specific qualifications on that, I probably leave to yourself as the specialist in that area.
No, I wasn't talking specific qualifications, but I mean just embedding it more in everyday life, making it part of our normal training and education type qualifications and processes. But moving on, Andy, would you like to comment on that?
Look, I would love to see the concepts around health and safety, around sustainability, around basic computer use, and around lean thinking embedded in schools. When I went to school 30 years ago, nobody was taught how to use a computer. My 18-year-old can run PowerPoint presentations better than I can, and I've been doing them for 20 years. But he's been at school, and he's done them at school. So the schooling system has recognised that that is a skill set that going forward into the workplace is going to be needed. Health and safety, quality systems, I think most companies will have some system or some way of inducting their people to make sure they understand that safety is part of this business. The senior management have got it in their head that that's a value that we need in our organisation. They recognise they've got no choice. And the reason why is because if they don't get it right, they go to jail. So we make them feel the need by basically making it a part of a law, if you want, from a business perspective for health and safety. They recognise that quality is really important because if they don't get quality right, they'll lose their customers. So they spend money in training and they make that part of their requirements for their people, and they'll put them on internal courses or show them how to use equipment to ensure quality. They're starting to recognise that energy usage is important and that recycling is important because, again, rules are coming into place and costs are being impinged upon them, and they're having to react and change their value system to include thinking around sustainability. It's slowly creeping in. And so, again, businesses will have things put in place for it. I think the idea and the connection that all this can be actually supported by a workforce that looks at cost reduction as part of their function and has skill sets and has an arsenal that they can draw on, a set of tools and techniques like problem solving, like, standardized work, value stream mapping, whatever skills that could be used to allow that individual to actually do as part of their workplace time, but not rely on the expert, the Six Sigma black belt with the the Jedi. We don't want that. We don't want expert. We don't have an expert now to make sure safety's spread across every workplace. Everyone's responsible for safety. And if you see someone walking around without safety boots on, it doesn't matter if it's the MD, you tell them to go and put some safety boots on. That culture exists in most businesses now. I'd love to see it get to the point where people are coming into the workplace, or at least once they get into the workplace, as part of being there, there's a program in place for them to learn those skills. Whether it's an external qualification or not, eventually it won't be because it becomes necessary to be in that place. But to have the recognition at the highest level that this is something that we should hold as a value. We want our people to be safe, to think quality, to think sustainable, to think energy costs, to think continuous improvement. That's what we want our employees to be like. And we're going to build a system of education within our business that does that. And yes, it costs a bit of money, but we know it's long-term thinking. That's my take on it. We've got to encourage them, and eventually it'll flush its way back through tertiary education, back into secondary education eventually. I think it has to.
Absolutely. So just to wrap up the questions, I'd like to go back to the second question on the screen. What opportunities does the modern manufacturing strategy, the ones we've spoken about that the government is focusing on, present for industry and business? Richard, would you like to kick that one off?
Indeed, Michael. So, it's great to see recycling in there. We have a minister now for waste reduction and a budget package around modern recycling infrastructure. So there is a lot of focus on this area. I think we're going to see, so as part of, we've seen that the waste and recycling bill come through. There's a whole bunch of money for product stewardship schemes. So we're going to see, some targeted schemes around where manufacturers are taking responsibility for their product lines. We have the televisions and computers scheme already for the last nearly a decade or so. They pay a kind of advanced deposit on the sale. Consumers buy that. That funds then that collection and remanufacturing and disassembly piece. So I think we're going to see, and the opportunities are for manufacturers to take kind of a systems view of their products and reimagine the end of life of that product and how they can cycle the materials or the product itself back into a second life.
Excellent. Sorry, I'm just getting a message at the same time on where we're going. Bradley.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot in the modern manufacturing strategy, but particularly around energy. Delivering lower energy costs is one of the things under the pillar of getting the economic conditions right for businesses, and that's something that we're going to do through mass penetration of renewable energy. But what happens in this scenario is that there's a thing called distributed energy resources, DER, and the whole national electricity market is changing their settings to allow businesses to pretty much get some additional revenue streams by being, because once renewable energy is overtaking our old coal-fired generation assets, there starts to be a big fluctuation of when energy is cheap, when energy is in massive supply, and when demand when the demand's there on the grid. It's different now, or will be different than the current setting. So at the moment, middle of the day, air conditioners are on, manufacturers are all going full blown, and there's a huge demand on the grid. You see, you do see potential of blackouts in the middle of summer in Western Sydney, in South Australia, in other areas. This is going to change dramatically as we reduce energy costs from renewables. And what happens is, in the middle of the day when the sun's shining and the wind's blowing, the energy is essentially gets down to almost free. And if those businesses that are able to store energy in whether it's batteries or whether it's thermal storage in their water tanks for their fire system or whatever it might be, they can start to make additional money through being able to sell energy back to the grid at the other times when there's more demand on the network. So that's one thing that I think is going to really present an opportunity for business to understand, to put the systems in place, and to understand that energy use and how they can participate in these emerging markets. The other thing that's really going to be driven by this modern manufacturing strategy is just the digital transformation. I mentioned earlier at the start, the electrification of industrial processes is the next wave. It's what's happening across the world. It's what's starting to happen quite dramatically in Australian manufacturing businesses. And this is, getting off our old gas-fired boilers, because everyone knows what's happening with the cost of gas. Well, when electricity is much cheaper in the middle of the day, it's going to make a whole lot more sense to be, using electric heating processes, whether that's electric arc furnaces for those high temperature loads, or whether it's electric heat pumps for making steam and low temperature steam and the like. We're going to see a real big shift in our manufacturing industry across the next 2 to 5 years, and this modern manufacturing strategy will drive it in those two big areas as related to energy.
A really good summary, and it's something that is coming through. And from an advanced manufacturing growth centres perspective, we've seen some huge innovative, not huge in size, but as far as shift of mindset goes, of local ideas being brought to commercialisation that are unique to the country, that are addressing this issue, that certainly wouldn't have come out unless the government had sort of backed this and put some funding into it, or they would have come out, but there would have been a bigger struggle to do it. So that's fantastic. So in order to break up the session a little bit, as you're aware, we have got some breakout sessions, and before we move into that, I'd just like to give it back to Peter to introduce a short video from the Minister which would also add some context to where this is going from a skills and training perspective.
As the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, I'm delighted to be part of this webinar series. I'd like to thank IBSA Group for their leadership in bringing together so many people across diverse industry networks. The Morrison government recognises the role of the manufacturing sector to the future prosperity of the Australian economy. And these events are a great way to provide relevant and practical feedback and advice back to government so that we can ensure the best possible outcomes for industry. The modern manufacturing strategy is a central plank of the Morrison government's agenda to fast-track Australia's economic recovery and secure future jobs and growth. Of course, an important element of delivering modern manufacturing in Australia is having the right sort of skilled workers across all 6 national manufacturing priorities. Our vocational education and training system is critical to the national economy and ensuring Australia's future prosperity. We need to support people to get the skills that will help us rebuild. And our role as a government is to get the policy settings right to ensure that those in the workforce have the opportunity to upskill and reskill. We know you need a strong, responsive and adaptable training system that can meet the needs of learners and employers. This is particularly important for the manufacturing industry, with a large percentage of your workforce gaining their skills through vocational education and training courses. And that's why the Morrison government is investing around $7 billion this year alone in the VET system, the biggest investment on record. You, as businesses and industry, have already told us that you need a pipeline of skilled workers to support our economic recovery. And that's why we announced a $1.2 billion investment to help create 100,000 new apprenticeships through the Boosting Apprenticeships Commencement Wage Subsidy. It's also why we established our $1 billion Job Trainer Fund, which will provide over 300,000 additional free or low-cost training places in sectors of demand. We also established the National Skills Commission to provide a new source of intelligence on Australia's labour market, workforce changes and current and emerging skills needs. That is the key, areas of skills needs. In other words, a focus on training in areas of anticipated employment growth like modern manufacturing. The Morrison government will continue to do all that it can to support Australian manufacturing, with a focus on getting more Australians trained with the right skills to drive this important industry. This is going to be a skills-led recovery, and your engagement with events like this IBSA webinar series are a key part of getting it right. I thank you for your support and dedication to grow and modernise the manufacturing sector, and I really hope that your discussions are productive. Enjoy the webinar.
All right, I'm going to open the poll for you now. So the poll is going to come up on the right-hand side. There are 3 questions. So have you identified opportunities for your business industry as part of the value chain supporting the 6 modern manufacturing strategy priority areas? Question number 1. And what do you see as the most significant change as to how the work will be organised over the next 5 years? And finally, to what extent will workforce skills development be critical for your business to succeed? For your business success, apologies. So if you can make your choice and click that submit button, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, I have about 17% of the people through at the moment, so still quite a few more who need to start making their choices. Thank you. Sorry, Arjun, could I ask you just to assist Michael? He seems to have dropped out. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah, Michael can't get back in, so he does need your help.
All right. Polls are coming in. Thanks, everybody. Peter Nemesis, I might need to revert to you if Michael doesn't get back in time just to talk to the poll results. I'll tell you what they are and ask for your comments. Thank you, Peter. All right, just one more person. If they could just click that submit, that would be wonderful. We can close those and we can move forward. Thank you. Thank you. Final person. You click submit. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and pop those results up for you.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Michael, are you back with us? If not, Peter, I might just speak to you. Can you see the results up on the far right there, Peter?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Peter. Can you see those up the top right? Okay, Michael's back in.
Yes,
Thank you, Michael. Are you there? All right. No problem. I'll talk to the results for you and ask for your feedback, if that's all right with you, Michael.
Yes, I've got a problem.
That's okay. Don't worry. We'll make this all happen together. All right. So have you identified any opportunities for your business or industry as part of the value chain supporting the 6 modern manufacturing strategy priority areas? Majority of people said between 1 and 2. Is that what you expected there, Michael?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Peter, we'll go ahead with you if that's all right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I think that that's probably on par with what we'd expect out of that, but I thought that there may be a little bit more towards the focus on improvements, improved productivity and efficiency to keep our competitive edge with our manufacturing, or to develop that side to it so that we'd go a little bit more. But there was a little bit, and adoption, I think the not surprising is that we did have 21% for the adoption of new and emerging technologies, because I think that's the main thing that's happening now with automation, development of robotics, and I think the pressure on quality as well is that we maintain that through automation and standardisation of processes.
Thank you very much. And the final question?
Yeah, to what extent is skills development? I think I've missed out question 2 as well. I'll just quickly go through there. Is we had some things there with a little bit more on demand for workforce skills, specialist skills. There are new skills, again, with automation and things coming through. There's more skills required against those. And the third question, adoption, my extent workforce development critical for your business success. We had those there, which was the biggest answer was no answer, but it'll be to a great extent. And I think what's important through those is and I think it was mentioned through the panel session, is that there's more and more focus on a skilled workforce. And by skilled workforce, I mean the people who are trained and actually can do the job as well. And I think we need people who not only have a qualification, but they have the necessary skills and have been trained and actually develop those in the workplace so that they can take a project or a problem or an issue and work out how they can manage that and do that better. So I think it's probably along the lines that I expect out of it, but it's great to get that confirmation that my thinking was pretty much on line for what we need to do.
Thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciated that feedback. All right, so we're about to go into breakout groups. So we have 3 breakout groups, and you've all been allocated to a breakout group. Now, if you didn't get back to us, we have allocated you where we think you thought you would like to go. So when I open the breakout groups, you will have an option to join or later. These breakout groups are going to run for 20 minutes. If you decide that this is not the group you choose to be in, please will you click on later. It will have the name of the group coming up as you get that option to join or later. Click on later, and then we'll ask you in the main plenary session again which session you'd rather join. So I'm going to go ahead and open those now. So there's competitive systems and practices, energy efficiency, and recycling. And Michael Grogan, if I can just suggest maybe leave your webcam off for the moment, that's fine with your internet, and hope you can still go ahead with that group there.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you fine. That's great.
Cool.
That's what we need. Wonderful. Thanks, Michael. All right, I'm going to start the breakout sessions now, everybody. We'll see you on the other side in 20 minutes. Thank you.
So thanks, everyone, and I apologise to my group. We did have some technical problems on getting the chat and the questions, and we're really just starting to get into the swing of it. It's almost like a 3-beer type conversation on getting something deep and philosophical when you start drilling down into those points. But what I'd like to do now is just go back to the other facilitators, Bo and Andrew, and get them just to provide a bit of an overview and feedback, and then hand it back to Peter to give us a bit of a wrap up and a where to from here. So, Bo, would you like to kick off?
Not a problem. Thanks, Michael. So we had, I think we set a record for a small group, a group of 2 or 3, but we had some good discussions nonetheless. So the main outcome that we were looking at was just about the education space. What was that was the biggest problem there, and it was about breaking out of silos and being looking at sustainability education, and in this case, energy efficiency, not as a niche or one topic that you do and then you move away and then you move on to whatever the other topics are that you're forming up your qualification. So it's really just about how do you increase the spread and the adoption of sustainability topics, not just energy efficiency, but certainly energy efficiency, to stop it being a niche subject.
So it basically goes back to that embedding and the culture and some of those fundamental skills that we do need to moving forward. Absolutely. Andrew, what about a bit of an overview from your group?
Not enough time. Moving on. And talk about lean manufacturing. We told we had 20 minutes and then all of a sudden it was 15. Makes it very challenging to achieve KPIs in that respect. A couple of things jumped out and started by Richard pointing to a very good example, I thought, of a company that is actually thought of as one thing, but in point of fact, it's so many different things. And in terms of transition and challenges and disruption, a good example of why recycling is, in one sense, only a subset of a number of different other challenges that manufacturing will have going forward. And the example was given of IKEA, a company that is now repurposing, returning its own batteries and recycling them. A company that is now encouraging the household to actually bring their furniture back to them and they will repurpose the furniture. A company that has undertaken the sale of solar panels, which are manufactured in Australia on license. So you've got a modern manufacturer that is seen as a retailer, but it's in fact a very modern manufacturer of both product and service. And so what does that look like? So that was one interesting case study. The second that was highlighted by the participants was, so whose responsibility is this in a business? The challenges and the dramatic changes that Bradley and Richard and Andy alluded to are correct. And I don't think that there was anybody who disagreed that they would have great impact. But where does it sit inside a business to effect that change? And I guess I challenged the group by saying, well, is it one person? Is it everybody? And that then led to an important question of, well, what's the skills? And I think Andy alluded to this earlier. What's the skill that needs to be embedded across everybody to be able to achieve that kind of improvement that's more than just one individual or one piece of technology or one particular business approach? So probably more questions questions asked and answered, but a very productive conversation and a little bit of singing along the way as well.
That's good. I'm pleased you didn't have the same technical issues that we did. I'm going to just break with tradition a bit instead of me reporting back, because I'm going to throw it back to Andy to give us that analogy, because I think that summed up the change of the skill set, the change of requirements moving forward, and how we can address, rather than a philosophical perspective of where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years' time, whether we are going to be speaking the same language and having that same philosophy. Would you just, I know there's nothing worse than saying, say what you said again, because I can never do it.
All right. So the analogy that I used was, imagine if the Australian government decided this week that the language of Australia going forward is not going to be English, it's going to be French. Made a decision that we're going to be all speaking French in this country going forward. If that was the case, then the skill set around speaking French would be in demand in every single industry, whether it be a hospital, whether it was retail, whether it was in banking or manufacturing. Everybody would want that skill set to speak French because they would need it to be able to operate in the working environment, in the business environment in the new Australia. I see continuous improvement, the concept of reducing cost, being sustainable, removing energy costs where not necessary, shaving process times down, improving the ability of the process to deliver the quality that's required, improving safety, etc., etc. I see that as the new language of Australia. It is a skill set that's required in every aspect, every corner of the economy if Australia is going to compete on the global stage. Now, I think that's how we've got to see it. And therefore, this idea of competitive manufacturing, as it used to be called, which thankfully the government has changed now to competitive systems and practices, is a recognition. This is a skill set that is, it's an underpinning life skill that's required in the new environment that we're finding ourselves rapidly heading towards. That's how I see this thing. It's a cultural thing.
So what you're saying is basically if we embed this as a skill, we're going to breed the resilience to be able to combat all of the issues and all the problems that get thrown at us, whether it be in life or in manufacturing itself.
I think so. I mean, the core edict of this is the elimination of waste, which obviously fits nicely with the recycling side of things. The elimination of waste fits nicely in energy consumption and energy usage as well. And everything around it, that mindset is what drives those projects in my mind. You can't have the question was who does this? Well, if the individual that's in charge of energy has got no concept of continuous improvement, what's going to happen? Nothing. They've got to have that as an underpinning skill.
Michael, can I jump in and make a conversation or observation to the conversation?
Yep, you can have the final say.
No, I just want to echo Andy's comments. It's Mike Valentine here from Vative. You know, when we talk about competitive systems and practices, and Andy mentioned the name change from competitive manufacturing, one of the things that has been very beneficial from that has been the fact that this is a recognized qualification. It's not just for manufacturing, but is applicable across service sector, health, manufacturing as well, which fits in perfectly with the French analogy that Andy just spoke of. But one of the key elements of Lean in this package is standardization. And what we don't have with this package is a standardized approach of actually implementing it across states. We have state training authorities with different implementation rules, different interpretations, different applications, which makes it very difficult for large nationally based or national clients to implement CSNP across the board. So I think this is an elephant in the room that's not being discussed, and I think it's a critical piece for this package to actually be picked up and applied and benefited from by business.
Certainly, and thanks for that, Mike, and I'm sure everyone's got their head down making a note of that. Before handing it back to Peter, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation. Thanks for the patience. As I said, and reiterating what Andrew said, it was a bit of a just in time. with the time being cut back, because I think we have started on a very large conversation that's going to have some far-reaching outcomes. So thank you, everyone. I'd like to hand it back to Peter to wrap up the session. Peter.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, there's a few things out there, but firstly, I'd like to thank our panellists, Andy, Bradley, and Richard, and also yourself, Michael, and Bo and Andrew for hosting the breakout sessions. There's a few things that come out of this, and let's go back to the roadmap themes, which was really about ensuring vocational education systems provide the workers with the skills they needed. It's also about building management capabilities, increasing the supply chain resilience, or even if you substitute that to be value chain resilience, and building a scale competitiveness across Australian manufacturing. There's a few things that came out of this, and I'd just like to touch briefly on some of my observations through there, if you indulge me. And one was really we had some talk about problem solving, lead, value, waste management, carbon issues, and also there was a few comments about the CSP package lacking direction on all those issues. And I think that's a fair point, but I think the main point is, and I think Mike touched on a little bit as well, is that competitive system packages is really focused on elimination of waste. So competitive system practice can be applied to carbon emissions, waste management, business improvement, all those areas. I'm not sure if it needs that focus on it. And I think some of the things we say is that how do we increase the adoption of sustainability? And that's probably about business awareness, how we can get to business to show them the importance of this continuous improvement, to make the improvements, the importance and the benefits of that side to it as well. The other thing that comes out of, I think across the board there, we talked about, there was a bit of discussion in various areas about looking at data, doing those things. It's one thing to have data. And then an improvement on that, of course, is having data analysis, where we do some analysis of the data to try and work out what it is. But I think the important thing that's missing is data analytics. What we need to do is then go and look at the data and then establish trends, see where it's coming from, what are the points for all these sorts of information. We see data coming through every day about various things happening. There's a survey of 2,000 people of something, and they think that 86% of people should be wearing caps or whatever it is. But it depends on who they've asked, who that cohort is, and that's the data analytics that we're not actually getting. And I think that's going to be pretty important in the future to be able to do that. I think some of the things that we need to look at are captured within, there's a lot of good comments that came out of today's breakout sessions. I think there's a lot of work for us to do in the Industry Records Committee to look at this, analyse it, and with IBSA to analyse it. And maybe that's where the analytics come in. What does it actually mean? But I think the biggest takeaway for me is how do we impress on business that this is so important for their future? So I think just in summary, we've got with those things, we've conducted some webinar series which is covered off on textiles, aerospace, process manufacturing, furnishing, manufacturing, engineering and sustainability. So I suppose then it is where to from here. So out of that, then we'll develop, or IBSA will develop an industry insights report, which is then fed through to the government. So the feedback received from today's webinar will be incorporated as submission to the government early next year and reported directly on our IRC and what the implications are over the next 5 to 10 years. So it also then look at the importance of skills development and it support the digitisation of needs. And I think we talked a little bit about Industry 4.0, how we then connect everything through the internet, how we get the machines and importantly people talking to each other, how we get people talking to machines, how we get machines talking to machines to eliminate some of the process errors through the system. So then once we've got the industry insights report, then there'll be a series of industry leaders roundtables which will be hosted by government as well. And then from that, then they'll develop modern manufacturing strategy and the key priority areas. So this is important in forming advice to government for the future, but there will also be a follow-up survey that I encourage everyone to contribute to, and if necessary, circulate out to others as well. And I suppose the last closing point is look out for more from IBSA in 2021. The more we can engage, I think the better the product is, and the more we can influence government as well. Antoinette, was there anything you wanted to say finally?
No, I think that you've covered off really well. Thank you very much, Peter. I'd like to just thank you and Michael for your work today in facilitating groups. We had a lot of technical issues, but we've managed to capture a lot of really good information from key industry people. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Greatly appreciate your attendance today and look forward to catching up with everybody, and hopefully we can circulate the message about future webinars and get people to contribute to these going forward. They're very important for the future of Australia and the future of training. Everybody, thank you very much and hope to see you all soon. Thank you.